Turning now to top story this morning, rushing up to the debt ceiling. Total federal debt today whopping 124% of GDP. That's $31 trillion, with big stimulus bills from previous administrations adding to that total. But the debt fight comes after major bank collapses and an uncertain time for the economy. It could have disastrous consequences if not resolved. Joining us with a look at how we got here, Yahoo Finance's Rick Newman, who calls this the dumbest law in a new column?
I do. This is America's dumbest law. And I'm here under duress talking about this. I don't want to be here talking about the debt ceiling.
None of us want to be talking about
the debt ceiling. This is a stupid man-made problem, but here it is. So, just to put this in perspective, this is supposed to impose some fiscal discipline on Congress, and it's gotten to the point where it basically does exactly the opposite of what it's supposed to do. It creates instability, which is what it's doing right now. Markets now have to figure out, as if markets don't have enough to worry about with a possible recession, inflation, all these bank failures. Now markets have to figure out, is the United States going to default on its debt because of these idiots in Congress? This should not be a thing. And when you hear people say invoke the 14th Amendment, that basically means just forget about the debt limit. The Treasury can continue to issue debt, basically ignoring the debt limit and daring somebody to file a lawsuit against that, which would go to the Supreme Court. And then we would find out. The Supreme Court would say the debt ceiling is either constitutional and we have to have it, or it is unconstitutional because it violates the 14th Amendment, which says the validity of the debt of the United States shall not be questioned. Well, guess what? Having this debt ceiling does question the validity of U.S. debt. So if President Biden were to take that draconian approach, he might be doing future presidents a favor by possibly just getting rid of the whole thing. And by the way, Congress could repeal the debt limit and just say we're not going to do this anymore. The idea that this has established any fiscal discipline is absurd, because we have a $31 trillion national debt, which is 125% of GDP. So it hasn't imposed any fiscal discipline. Am I making my point here? Like, I guess I could continue to rant, but It's just dumb and it has outlived its usefulness. We should get rid of it.
Well, I think your words also kind of capture what we had seen show up in the data from even the Gallup poll and the confidence in U.S. economic leaders right now. And that's the people who are making these spending decisions across leaders in Congress, all the way to Fed chairs and Treasury secretaries and so forth. So all of this considered, it's perhaps a good reminder, what happens if this doesn't get passed or get raised? What then?
So that means the United States has to figure out whom not to pay. So the Treasury issues checks all the time. They go to Social Security recipients, they go to vendors, they go to government employees. So right now, the Treasury is not borrowing money because we have hit the debt limit. What it's doing is shuffling money among different government accounts, borrowing from this account to pay this account, and it's going to not be able to do that around the beginning of June, according to the Treasury Secretary, Janet Yellen. So then what? That's when you have to figure out, so that's called prioritization. Do you say we're going to pay some people and not pay others? That is a default. That's a default right there. And the consequences of that would be horrendous. So you would see skyrocketing interest rates. That would affect inflation. The dollar would plunge. It would affect everything in the whole market. So we're talking about an asset class, U.S. Treasuries. This is the largest class of securities in the world. And everybody who manages money relies on Treasury securities. So it would throw into chaos almost every part of the global financial system. And, there's always this push to try to find another reserve currency so all the other countries in the world don't have to deal with the dollar. Well, that would help. So it would help make the case, use the euro, use the Chinese RMB. The Chinese RMB is not going to be a reserve currency, but something else could, or it could be a graduated thing. So here we go again. We went through this in 2011, right up to the brink. It looks like we could go right up to the brink again. We should not be doing this.
I'm going to play devil's advocate for just a second on one part of what you said, which is that this is not an effective way to get spending down, because evidenced by the amount of debt that we have. And yet this could result in some spending cuts, right? If Biden does indeed end up doing some sort of bargain with McCarthy, right?
That remains to be seen. So Democrats who control the Senate would have to agree to some spending cuts. But let's just go back to where the money is. So Republicans are saying, we're not going to touch Medicare, we're not going to touch Social Security, and we're not going to touch defense. So that's 60% of all the spending right there. So what's left? When you hear people say waste, fraud, and abuse, everybody always says waste, fraud, and abuse. They can never find it, and there's not much of it anyway. So we're talking roads, bridges, arts funding, health
that we actually
programs.
need.
Yeah, we're talking programs that actually affect real people. And, you know, we've been down this road before. These end up not being binding. Another party comes into Congress. Democrats always raise spending, and Republicans always cut taxes. And nobody ever worries about the deficit or the annual debt. Politicians are never going to solve this problem. It's going to take markets to solve this problem. There will come a point when markets say, U.S. government, there's too much U.S. government debt. It's going to play out in markets, not among politicians, and that is going to force the politicians to do something about it, including Medicare and Social Security are really big ones.
And then there are the economists who think debt is not a problem. U.S. government debt is not a problem and never will be. But that's all. That is a discussion for another day. We could talk for another 5 minutes.
It's going to be a problem someday. It's actually not right now.
Right.
Right now, it's not.
No.
Rick, always a pleasure getting
Thanks,
some
guys.
insights, the perspective, and the full write-up is up on the Yahoo Finance homepage right now. Thanks so much, Rick.